My name is Eric Elmore, and I'm a student at the University of Colorado Denver in the Masters in Early Childhood Special Education licensure program. I'm going to talk to you about inclusion in education. My topics which I'm going to present is background information on inclusion, how inclusion is defined, and the research I have found, and I provided two videos which talk about how children in special education programs in other countries define inclusion and how they understand it. A little bit about the background. There is one primary case which has brought inclusion to light. It's the Brown versus Board of Education. This case dealt primarily with segregation in the United States. However, when the Supreme Court made its decision, parents figured if students of color could intermingle in classrooms with non-white children, then certainly their child with a disability has the right to receive an appropriate education with typically developing children. The other factors, which is a major contribution to inclusion in education, developed in the 1975 Education for All Handicapped Children Act. This legislation allowed children with disabilities to receive a free and appropriate public education. It has been modified, amended, and reauthorized. Today it is known as IDEA, or Individuals with Disability Education Act. IDEA provides programs and services and supports to infants, toddlers, and preschool children who are developmentally at risk and supports for their families. Another contributing factor which propelled inclusion was the U.S. Supreme Court of Appeals ruling with Timothy versus Rochester School District. This ruling established that all school districts have the responsibility for educating every child, including those with disabilities. In an effort to understand inclusive education, it is important to understand there is no universally agreed understanding of inclusive education. As we progress in the field of early learning, we have learned to define what inclusivity in the classroom looks, feels, and should be. Many practitioners during the beginning phases didn't have a clear understanding of how children would benefit and participate while being in an inclusive classroom. The approach practitioners took was centered on the research perspectives of theorists Maria Montessori, Eric Anderson, Jean Piaget, and Lev Vygotsky. In the most basic understanding, inclusive education can mean providing to all students, including those with significant disabilities, equitable opportunities to receive effective educational services with the needed supplementary aids and support services in age-appropriate classrooms in their neighborhood schools in order to prepare students for productive lives as full members of society. What I have found during my research is this. Inclusive education is about changing the educational system so that it is flexible enough to accommodate any learner. What it is not is about trying to change the learner so that he or she can fit more comfortably and conveniently into an unchanged educational system, meaning we have one plan and we do one thing, either it's going to work or it's not going to work. You cannot box children in. We have to do it individually on their own time frame. What I've also found is inclusive education is an ongoing effort to identify and remove barriers that exclude learners with each unique situation. What it is not is based on the following set formula of actions that can be used in any situation. So we can't come up with one way of just doing things. We have to come up with many ways which benefit the child. And what I've also found in my research is something that can happen outside the formal educational system, as well as in formal school environments. Meaning it can happen in the classroom, but it can also happen at home. It can also happen at the church. It can also happen, those supports can benefit the child in the long run. And that goes, what it's not is just a process that happens in formal schools. Like I was saying, it can happen anywhere, just not one set standard of where it can happen. Those supports that we put in place in the classroom that can be transferred into the home as well. The parents can benefit, those that the kid interacts with can benefit in the long run. And what I provided at the end of this presentation is two videos which talk about how children are defining special education and inclusive education and how they see it themselves as a benefit and how they are defining what inclusion looks like in their other countries. So please enjoy those videos. Thank you and have a good evening.